We practice this, but we think so much alike that sometimes we step on each other. Your appearance, obviously, with your gear, and to go along with his comment, which basically was, if you're looking good, you're more liable to get a free referral by having a client who's looking for a DJ watch you set up, and you're fairly neatly dressed, but they also see your gear, and it's neatly dressed as well. So they have two positive impacts, which basically didn't cost you anything except a little bit of time to dress up and a little bit of care and time with the way your gear looks. The number one thing that I see in a lot of people's setups is there are wires hanging all over the place, and there's so many ways that you can solve that. The first thing that comes to mind is Velcro. You can go to Lowe's, you can go to Home Depot, you can go to Walmart. You can get little black Velcro strips. So if you're on your speakers, you can strap those wires right to the top of the speakers, and you can use about 3 or 4 of them, and position your wires so that they are directly behind the fattest part of your speaker pole, so that when you see it from the outside, you don't even see a wire. This is my setup without lights. What I've done with my wires, I have stopped using gaffer's tape for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't like getting down on my knees anymore. And number 2, I'm just genetically challenged. I can't pull tape off of a roll to save my life. So what I did is I did the 749 solution times 4 at Lowe's, and I got these rubber tipped mats. They're 2 feet by 3 feet long, and the only wires you see are the ones that are coming from underneath there, going right up the pole, and you can't see any wires coming off the pole. So the rubber mats are also useful for your power. What you can't see there is that I've got 2 mats on the floor that hide the cable that goes to the wall plug. And that's probably the only tape that I use is to tape it to the wall so that nobody trips against it. But that's a really easy way to get around having to do tape. Because I hate tape. Invariably, when I was using tape, I would run out of the right gaffer's tape, and I would have to use duct tape, which all that does is get goop all over your cables. So that's a little tip I can pass along for those of you that might be thinking about that.
And this would be my setup just a couple of years ago. And I don't go out of my way to make it very fancy, but I do like to make it as attractive as possible. The bride had requested I do a slideshow for her, and this was in a church fellowship hall. So we did a rear projection to hide the projector, since we had a big stage that, quite frankly, wasn't going to be used for anything that day. And we probably had almost 600 people come to this particular reception. It was one of the bigger ones I've done in quite some time, so sound was paramount, and the speakers are out there, but I'm not running tape. All I did was just lay my cord along the front edge of the stage against the floor. You really can't even see it unless you go over and look in that little groove. It's right there. And that's pretty much it. You'll notice that my computer's on 2 aluminum cases, and that worked fine for a while. I've since moved on from that, but you can be very creative with your setup and just make it very attractive without spending a lot of money on it.
This is what my setup looks like today. This is a representation of it, and it's not very clear here, but I have the same set of floor mats here, but I had a much smaller area to work with. So one of the really cool things about this setup is that this is with the lights, is that it's pretty symmetric, which is kind of the look I look for. The lights on each side are identical. I've got some spinners, got 2 mirror balls there. But the same thing applies, is that there's almost no wire showing at all. And I'm working on some methods to try to eliminate any other wire showing all the way down to the floor. But once they get wireless electricity, that's when I'm really going to make that transition.
And this is one of my setups. I actually have several different ones that I refer to now, depending on equipment, type of event, size, whatever. This is from last October, and it's just about as plain Jane as it can be. It's 2 speakers up on stands. I call it my board cube. It's just sitting on a 4-foot table with DJ skirts cover on it, and the planner at this particular facility really liked it because apparently she gets a lot of yahoos in there that don't really take that much pride in it. And you'll notice where my light show is. Almost nowhere in the picture. I actually have two Chauvet View 3s sitting on the floor pointing up at the ceiling. And I've got some video I can show you later what that looks like, but it looked pretty phenomenal. And the bride was more than pleased with it. One of the highlights of her evening, and earned me a nice tip on top of the day.
Okay, we have some additional tips here. One of the things that I like to do, particularly with a place that I've never played before, is to schedule a meeting, or at least make contact with the venue management. Find out who it is you're going to be working with. See the area that you're playing. There's nothing worse than going into a place, realize that you've been stuffed in the corner, and you're 50 feet away from the nearest plug, and you have 25 feet of extension cord. What do you do? A nice quick visit does two things. Number one, it puts you in front of that venue person. You don't have to dress up in a coat and tie to do that. But if you stop by in a pair of nice Dockers and a polo shirt and some business cards and introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm doing this wedding reception June 15th, and I'd like to see where the area is. And then occasionally they'll have a floor plan that they show you where they put the DJ, and that's a great time to adjust what you're doing. Because if you know in advance that you need 50 feet of extension cord, or you need something, let's say for example you don't have enough sound to take care of the room, that's your opportunity to get more sound.
Yes. Also, schedule follow-up meetings. Normally, when I meet with the bride and groom, this is just my personal experience, I'll do one meeting to go ahead and just sort of plan out how they want the day to flow. And then I'll do a second meeting if they're really big into their music to just go through the music requests. And typically, I might spend maybe an hour of their time at each meeting, and they're very appreciative of it. Bring them a pizza, make it an evening affair. They'll be much more receptive to your planning ideas, or if they need a little extra time to try to develop what they're looking at, then that's a perfect way to do it.
And you had asked, I think you had asked the question, how many times do you meet with your client? And the real answer to that is as often as they feel that they need to. I do know that there's some companies out there that they charge for additional meetings. We're not going to recommend that. I think you should meet with your client as often as they feel comfortable. If you spend 8 hours planning out their reception, you've got all the music and they're happy, all you need to do is just make a phone call a week in advance and say, okay, here's our lineup. Just briefly go everything over the phone. Has anything changed? Do you have any bridesmaids or groomsmen that are not showing up? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is also the thing that you're going to find most often happens, is that the lineup will change at the last minute. Even if you've got it all nicely typed up. We all know about plane delays based on the weather that we've had here the last week and a half, particularly in the mid-Atlantic sector. And people don't make the event. You know, there's no way to get over 4 feet of snow and expect people to be on time. So sometimes those things change. They drop out because they've had a falling out, and then sometimes they're ill. So a nice review right before the reception is really all you're going to need. And I would recommend doing that 2 weeks beforehand, because 100% of the time, the brides are going to submerge the last week. They're going to go underwater. They're not going to call anybody. They finally get focused. Yes, sir?
That last comment that you know if they're email included planners.
Yes.
Yes.
We used to do that in Cincinnati, and we ran into a problem with it.
What was the problem?
We meet with our brides the final week of and get everything finalized and send it off to them. The planner would change something. If he had that planner, he's out like this. So you call the bride room and change it. And they wouldn't call back and tell us until the day of. Or the planner would actually show up and say, no, we're going this way now.
Well, that's why one of the things that you do in advance is try to find out what the photographer's plans are. I've heard of areas in the country where the photographers are a little more